Trent brings up a good point. The benefit of that, though, is it terrifies the students.
Yeah. Oh my
When
God.
you become a really good instructor and you start using that kind of Socratic method where you're asking questions and trying to get to the heart of the issue, right? Like you're not just answering this question. You're like, what are we really talking about here?
Yeah.
What are we doing? Man, that really does terrify
What does he
the
want me to
students. It's
say?
great. Exactly.
What does he want me to say?
What is he getting at? He seems like he's having a conversation with me because he cares. Nothing makes a student more afraid than when they think you
My
care.
grandmother had this technique where my grandmother adored me, helped raise me, and she would walk up to me when I would screw up, and she was like, "Preston, you know, I think you're amazing, and I love you, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah." She's like, "Why would an amazing person do that?" And I was like, "What side of the argument am I on right now?"
Wow. First of all,
I'm gonna pick you up and I'm gonna slave you right down.
I was like, wait, how do I answer that question? I don't know. I'm 12. I don't even know why I did it.
That's emotional terrorism. That's diabolical.
Yeah, you're right though. You're right there, Preston. The Air Force is 100% all about the next shiny thing.
Stuff.
Things to help. And I think if we get to a point where we can, as an Air Force, we recognize obviously there's small pockets within the Air Force that
sure, of course,
human and that's the kind of corporate message is people and people matter and all that kind of stuff, which is 100% true because humans are going to be the ones that change the tide of a battle or a war or an engagement. But the technology is just a tool to help us get to that point. And as long as we continue to put that first, we're going to screw up.
Well, I would argue it's a little deeper for the Air Force because the folks that are getting managed and selected and raised in promotion are folks that are really good at collecting, managing, and taking care of stuff, right? And they like things pretty clean. And then you bearded rat bastard show up, right? You bunch of savages, and you're constantly sort of messy, necessarily messy. And so they come in and they feel like they need to clean things up. The problem is the Air Force is constantly risking making their unconventional forces conventional in order to fit into their little world. And we need to actually start developing Air Force leaders that understand they need a pocket of messy. They just have to protect the messy and keep the messy from getting out of hand. But they need to sort of leave it messy.
Well, that's one of those things that we do have a hard time explaining to leadership sometimes is like, well, why do you want to pick up this guy?
Yeah.
And we're like, well, because he's the right person. And they're like, why is he the right person? We're like, because he, they're like, where's the data on this? Like, where's the data to show me that this person is going to be good on team? And sometimes the data supports your argument. And sometimes it's like the person is barely passing, all of the, the qualifying factors. So, it's difficult. I think that's one of the problems. And also I think it's the I don't want to invest in this many people knowing that 90% of them aren't going to make it.
Yeah.
On the instructor side, I think that's a really difficult, emotional thing to do for a lot of our folks is like, I'm going to pour myself into all these folks and 90% of these folks are just going to one day walk up to me after I've tried to pour all my knowledge and goodness into them. And they're going to look me in the eye and say, I quit. And they're going to leave. And it's hard.
Yeah. I will say this, that MCTI, a lot of the work that we do out in the field, whether it be education or research, is giving the instructor cadre a valid scientific voice. And so that when you are like, I don't like the shape of that guy's head, our job is to be like, that's not what you mean. What you mean is this. And so we help develop a language and then rigorous methodology so you can go to your boss and go, I know the psychs and the human performance folks and security folks are giving you this data. Here's a different looking but equally robust data to give our voice to you. And I think that balances things out.
Yeah. Well, I think we have the data. We just don't. Yeah, like you said, we don't know how to explain it.
That's right.
We're like, we keep these folks up, and we want to see how they perform. We take away their food. We make them cold, wet, hungry.
Yeah.
But it's just that I don't know. There's always a gap between the nerds with the computers and us and finding the right person.
Nerds in the most loving way.
And in the most loving. I was typing this down in the note as we were talking, but being an instructor is it's super hard for dudes to accept because you quickly realize that it's a made game from the beginning. Especially in the assessment and selection sort of area, becoming an instructor is a whole other thing. Good instructors are very few and far between, but you realize as an instructor that really only two things ever happen, right? You realize you're completely irrelevant and the student that you completely like looked over, like that you didn't even think was going to make it, just ends up absolutely smoking it, does great. And they really didn't need you all that much at all, right? They had just made their mind up and they were on their path. And then the only other thing that you can do is pour your effort into the 91% of people that are going to fail. And you watch a whole bunch of people that you end up caring about just absolutely get smoked by the course, because it's still a hard course. And the second,
sorry, can I reframe that just a little bit? So one of the things that people sometimes, instructor cadre, especially at the SOCOM level or JSOC level, forget is that that is one perspective. Another perspective to remember is that when they come to your teams and they don't make it, they're not leaving the Air Force most of the time. They're going back somewhere. So if you broaden your spectrum and say, I'm going to make everyone who comes to me better for the country, right? It's a different framework than I'm going to develop everyone so that I succeed in selection. I think people can get more peace and contentment knowing that they're making the U.S. Air Force and thereby the country better by developing every single human comes in front of them. Sorry, your second point.
No, that was fantastic. I can't remember what good leader said this. I don't want to misattribute it, because I've got two people in my head that I thought I heard it for the first time. Yeah. But they would tell us that, like, hey, you were basically the ambassador for hundreds of people that aren't going to make it. They're never going to be a PJ in my specific case or in this specific context, but they're never going to be a PJ. However, you might be the only PJ that they ever meet. So conduct yourself like a professional, have a good course, treat people like humans. Like, they're going to go out. You get more recruiting from people that went to INDOC, that went to ANS, that went to try to do something and failed, and because those numbers are just much higher, and then went to a different career field. Like, that's a thing in and of itself. So that's great input. The first time I heard it, it was a very shocking thing for me to hear, because I never thought of it like that.
Yeah.